The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the low, anxious murmur of 1,000 different species. Ambassador Zexithara of the Meridian Empire adjusted her crystalline respiratory apparatus, watching the holographic display that showed the advancing darkness across the galaxy's outer rim. Entire star systems were going dark one by one, consumed by something the ancient precursor databases called the Silence. Honored representatives, Chancellor Vorthak's voice boomed across the amphitheater, his 6 arms gesturing toward the grim display. We have lost contact with 47 colonies in the past rotation. Our scouts report the same phenomenon everywhere. Worlds stripped bare, atmospheres drained, and no signs of life remaining. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Catherian delegate, her translucent form flickering with distress, spoke up. Our deep space sensors detect massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace. Whatever is doing this operates on a scale we cannot comprehend. Zexithara had seen the classified reports. The few automated probes that survived encounters with the Silence transmitted terrifying data before going offline. Colossal structures dark as the void itself, methodically harvesting entire worlds. They moved with purpose, following ancient star charts toward the galaxy's core, where the most populated systems thrived. Our combined fleets number in the millions, announced Admiral Korath of the Hegemony Defense Force, his scaled hide gleaming under the chamber's lights. We have the technological advantage of 15,000 years of advancement. Surely we can mount an effective resistance? The hologram shifted, showing battle footage from the recent engagement at Kepler Station. 30,000 Allied vessels had engaged what appeared to be a single harvester ship. The enemy craft, smooth and featureless as polished obsidian, had simply absorbed every weapon fired at it. Particle beams, quantum torpedoes, antimatter charges, all vanished into its surface without effect. Then it had retaliated. The recording showed Allied ships simply ceasing to exist. Not destroyed or damaged, but erased from reality as if they had never been built. In 17 minutes, the entire fleet was gone. The Harvester continued on its path, unimpeded. That was our most advanced battle group, Korath admitted, his usual bravado replaced by barely concealed fear. If our best weapons cannot even scratch their hulls, what hope do we have? Ancient sage Veltar, eldest member of the Council and survivor of the last great galactic war, rose slowly from his meditation pod. His telepathic voice touched every mind in the chamber. I have consulted the precursor archives. The Silence has awakened 3 times in galactic history. Each time the dominant civilizations fell. Only scattered primitives survived to rebuild over millions of years. The revelation sent waves of panic through the assembly. Delegates argued frantically in dozens of languages, their translator units working overtime. Some called for immediate evacuation to the galactic rim. Others demanded they make a final stand at the core worlds. A few suggested attempting to negotiate with the Silence, though no one knew if these entities even possessed the concept of communication. We need options, Chancellor Vorthak declared, calling for order. Our xenobiologists, military strategists, and philosophers must work together. There has to be something we're missing. Dr. Yalithian, the Confederacy's chief scientist, materialized a complex equation in the air before her. We've analyzed the energy patterns. The Silence feeds on advanced technology itself. Our quantum cores, our hyperspace drives, even our habitat systems. They're drawn to technological emanations like predators to prey. The more advanced a civilization, the more attractive a target. This explained why primitive worlds were left untouched, while advanced colonies vanished completely. The Silence harvested not just resources but technology itself, growing stronger with each conquest. Then we abandon our technology, suggested Delegate Mordeth desperately. Return to basic tools and wait for them to pass. Impossible, replied Dr. Yalithian. 30 billion beings depend on artificial atmosphere generation alone. Our food synthesis networks support quadrillions. Without technology, we die anyway, just more slowly. The debate continued for hours, growing more desperate as reports arrived of additional systems going dark. The Silence was accelerating, their harvester fleet spreading across multiple fronts. At their current rate of advance, they would reach the core worlds within 50 standard rotations. During a recess, Zexithara found herself in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Her aide, young Keflon, approached nervously. Ambassador, the Analysis Division has completed their review of primitive species in the outer territories. Most lack space travel entirely. What's the point of that data? She asked wearily. Well, there is one anomaly. A species in Sector 7G that achieved spaceflight only recently. Humans, they call themselves. They've expanded remarkably fast for such a young civilization, already established colonies in 12 systems. Zexthara barely listened. Another doomed species that would fall to the silence before they even knew what hit them. At least they would die quickly. The strange thing is, Keflon continued, their technology is completely different from anything in our databases. Primitive by our standards, but using principles we abandoned eons ago. Chemical rockets, nuclear fusion, even combustion engines in some applications. Irrelevant, Zexthara sighed. Primitive weapons won't succeed where our advanced arsenal failed. As she spoke, her personal communicator chimed with an urgent message. The silence had been detected entering Sector 7G, heading directly for the human colonies. Another species was about to vanish from the galaxy, and there was nothing anyone could do to save them. Back in the council chambers, Chancellor Vorthak called the session to order. We have reached a preliminary consensus. All civilian populations will be evacuated to the galactic rim. Our combined fleets will make a final stand at Nexus Prime. We estimate 40% survival probability for the evacuation ships. The assembled delegates accepted this grim calculus. It was better than total extinction. As they began coordinating the largest evacuation in galactic history, no one paid attention to the small notation in the overnight reports about a minor species that was about to encounter the silence in a remote sector of space. After all, what could one primitive civilization possibly do that the combined might of 15,000-year-old empires could not? The galaxy was about to find out. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the sensor readings on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel. What she saw made no sense according to every physics textbook ever written. The massive object approaching their position near Kepler 442 defied classification. It was simultaneously there and not there, registering on gravitational sensors while remaining invisible to optical instruments. Ma'am, we're receiving some kind of transmission, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. It's not radio or any electromagnetic frequency we recognize. The signal is coming through quantum fluctuations in space-time itself. Put it through the Universal Translator prototype, Chen ordered, though she doubted the experimental device would work on truly alien communications. To everyone's surprise, words began forming on their displays, though the syntax was strange. Attention, primitive vessels. You have entered a restricted zone. Withdraw immediately or face termination. This is your only warning, Chen frowned. The arrogance in that message rubbed her the wrong way. Humans had been exploring space for barely 50 years, but they'd learned not to back down from bullies. Open a channel, Torres. All frequencies. Channel open, Captain. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. These are unclaimed territories under the Frontier Exploration Accords. State your business and intentions. The response came immediately, filled with what sounded like amusement. Fascinating. The local primitives possess rudimentary communication capabilities. Very well, creatures. We are the vanguard of the silence. We harvest technological civilizations to fuel our expansion. Your species will be processed within the next solar rotation. Resistance is futile and will only prolong your suffering. Chief Engineer Murphy looked up from his station. Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups from that object. Whatever it's planning to do, it's going to be big. Chen had faced impossible odds before. During the colony wars, she'd commanded a single frigate against an entire rebel fleet and somehow emerged victorious. The key had been thinking differently than her enemies expected. Torres, patch me through to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Earth Command receiving, Captain Chen, came Admiral Harrison's voice. We're tracking your situation via quantum entanglement communicator. What's your assessment? Sir, we've made contact with a hostile alien force claiming to harvest technological civilizations. They're threatening to attack within 24 hours. Requesting instructions. There was a long pause. Chen could imagine the chaos erupting in the command center back on Earth. First contact with aliens, and they turned out to be genocidal harvesters. Captain, our xenobiology experts are analyzing the transmission data. Dr. Patel believes these entities feed on advanced technology somehow. Every probe we've sent toward their position has simply vanished. Understood, sir. What are our orders? Engage if necessary. but your primary mission is to gather intelligence. We need to know what we're dealing with before they reach Earth." Chen smiled grimly. "Copy that, Admiral." Defiance out. She turned to her crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're apparently the welcoming committee for humanity's first alien visitors. They don't seem particularly friendly, so let's show them what human hospitality looks like. Murphy, what's our weapons status?" "All systems green, Captain. Nuclear torpedoes loaded, railguns charged, and the experimental plasma cannons are ready for field testing. Though if these aliens are as advanced as they claim, our weapons might not be effective." "Maybe not," Chen agreed. "But we're going to try anyway. That's what humans do." The next several hours were spent in preparation. The crew ran combat drills, checked equipment, and analyzed every scrap of data about their mysterious opponent. The alien vessel, if it could be called that, continued its approach, growing larger on their sensors despite remaining invisible to the naked eye. Dr. Kim, the ship's physicist, made an interesting discovery. "Captain, I've been studying the energy signatures from the alien craft. They seem to operate by manipulating quantum fields directly. It's incredibly advanced, but there's something odd about their approach." "Odd how?" "They're using brute force methods. Imagine using a sledgehammer to perform brain surgery. Effective, yes, but wasteful and inelegant. We might be able to exploit that." Chen nodded. "What do you recommend?" "Our weapons use completely different principles. Chemical explosives, kinetic energy, electromagnetic acceleration. They might not recognize the threat until it's too late. Or they might just absorb our attacks like they did with those other species the transmission mentioned." "Maybe," Kim admitted. "But humans have always been good at surprising people." As the alien vessel drew closer, its true scale became apparent. The thing was enormous, easily 50 kilometers long and shaped like a geometric impossibility. It seemed to fold in on itself, existing in more dimensions than human minds could properly process. "Captain," Torres called out urgently, "I'm detecting multiple energy discharges from the alien vessel. They're targeting our colony on Kepler 442b. On the main screen, they watched in horror as beams of dark energy struck the planetary surface. But instead of explosions, the beams seemed to simply erase everything they touched. Buildings, vehicles, even the ground itself vanished as if it had never existed. 30,000 colonists on that planet," Murphy whispered. Chen's jaw tightened. She'd seen enough. "All hands, battle stations. Arm all weapons and prepare for combat. We're going to give these bastards a fight they won't forget." The Defiance, humanity's pride and joy, was a marvel of human engineering. Built with resources from across the solar system, she mounted weapons that represented the pinnacle of human military technology. Against an enemy that casually erased planets, she was hopelessly outmatched. But Captain Chen had never believed in hopeless causes. As alarms sounded throughout the ship and her crew prepared for battle, she opened a final communication channel. "Alien vessel, this is your last warning. Cease your attack on human colonies immediately or face the consequences." The response was filled with what might have been laughter. "Amusing. The primitive vessel wishes to engage us in combat. Very well. We shall process your crude technology and add it to our archives. Attack, little creature. Show us what your pathetic species considers warfare." Chen smiled coldly. "You asked for it. All weapons fire at will." The Defiance unleashed everything she had. Nuclear torpedoes streaked toward the alien vessel, followed by tungsten penetrator rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Plasma cannon blasts lit up the darkness between the ships. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien craft continued its approach, apparently unaffected. Then the nuclear torpedoes reached their target and detonated in brilliant flashes of fusion fire. The tungsten rounds struck milliseconds later, followed by the plasma streams, and for the first time in eons, something unexpected happened to the silence. The alien vessel shuddered. The bridge of the Defiance erupted in surprised cheers as the massive alien vessel visibly recoiled from their attack. Captain Chen watched in amazement as sections of the seemingly invulnerable craft flickered and wavered, like a hologram losing power. "Direct hit," Murphy shouted from his station. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations across their hull. Whatever we just did, they didn't like it." Dr. Kim was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "Incredible. The quantum field distortions around their ship are destabilizing. Our crude nuclear fusion reactions are somehow interfering with their exotic matter systems." The alien response came swiftly. Dark energy beams lanced out toward the Defiance, but Captain Chen had expected retaliation. Evasive maneuvers. Pattern Delta 7. The human ship twisted and rolled through space with an agility that surprised even her crew. Unlike the massive, ponderous vessels favored by most spacefaring civilizations, human ships were built for speed and maneuverability. The Defiance danced between the alien weapon strikes like a fighter pilot avoiding flak. Their targeting system seemed designed for larger, slower targets, observed Lieutenant Torres. They're having trouble tracking us. Good, Chen replied. Reload all tubes and prepare for another salvo. This time concentrate fire on that damaged section Kim identified. As the crew worked to rearm their weapons, the alien vessel began broadcasting again. For the first time, their communications carried undertones of something other than arrogant superiority. Impossible. Primitive chemical weapons cannot affect silence technology. Our shields absorb all forms of directed energy. Our hull materials exist partially outside normal spacetime. Maybe your problem is thinking too hard, Chen muttered, then raised her voice. Torres, send them a message. Tell them welcome to human space, where the impossible happens every Tuesday. The second volley proved even more effective than the first. The concentrated nuclear strikes punched through the weakened section of alien hull, and for a brief moment, the crew of the Defiance glimpsed the interior of a silence vessel. What they saw defied comprehension. The ship's interior existed in a state of constant flux, with corridors and chambers that twisted through dimensions human mathematics couldn't describe. Strange forms moved within those spaces, beings of living shadow that seemed to feed on the very concept of technology itself. My God, Dr. Kim whispered. They're not just using the technology. They are the technology. The ship is alive or something close to it. But the breach was already sealing itself, the alien vessel's regenerative systems working to repair the damage. However, something had changed. The ship's approach had slowed, and its energy signature was fluctuating wildly. Captain, reported Chief Murphy, I'm detecting secondary explosions throughout their vessel. Our nuclear detonations seem to have triggered some kind of cascade failure in their power systems. Chen nodded grimly. It makes sense. They've evolved to consume advanced technology. Quantum computers, exotic matter reactors, artificially generated energy fields. But nuclear fusion? That's barely controlled stellar fire. Raw, chaotic, and probably too primitive for their systems to properly process. The alien communications resumed, but now there was unmistakable confusion in their transmissions. Your weapons? They operate on principles we had forgotten. Crude matter energy conversion through stellar nucleosynthesis. These methods were abandoned by intelligent species millions of cycles ago. Abandoned by intelligent species? Chen laughed. Buddy, you just insulted humanity's greatest achievement. We took the power of stars and crammed it into weapons small enough to fit on a single ship. You think that's primitive? That's not primitive, that's insane. And humans specialize in insane. To emphasize her point, she ordered another attack. This time, the crew had modified their approach based on Dr. Kim's analysis. Instead of trying to overwhelm the alien defenses, they targeted the quantum field generators that seemed to give the vessel its exotic properties. The results were spectacular. As tungsten penetrators punched through weakened armor and nuclear fire bloomed against the alien hull, entire sections of the massive ship began phasing in and out of reality. The Silence had built their technology around the assumption that they would face predictable advanced weapons. Humans had given them nuclear-powered chaos. Damage assessment? Chen called out. Their forward weapons array is offline, Torres reported. I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout their ship. Captain, I think we might actually be winning this fight. But even as he spoke, the alien vessel began to change. Its hull started flowing like liquid metal, reconfiguring itself into new patterns. Weapon ports opened that hadn't existed moments before, and energy readings spiked beyond anything they'd recorded. They're adapting, Dr. Kim warned. Learning to counter our weapons. Chen's expression hardened. Then we adapt faster. Murphy, what's our status on the experimental weapons? The prototype antimatter warheads are ready, but Captain, we've never tested them under combat conditions. They could blow us up just as easily as the enemy. Sometimes you have to roll the dice, Chen replied. Load them up. As the human crew prepared their most dangerous weapons, the damaged alien vessel sent one final transmission. But this time it wasn't directed at the Defiance. Instead, it was broadcasting on a frequency that reached across the galaxy. Alert, Alert. Previously unknown aggressive species encountered in Sector 7G. Recommend immediate fleet deployment. Primitive chemical weapons proving unexpectedly effective against silence technology. Species designation, human. Threat level, reassessing. Error. Unable to calculate threat parameters. Dr. Kim looked up from his instruments in shock. Captain, that transmission is being picked up by dozens of receivers across the galaxy. They're calling for reinforcements. How many reinforcements? Chen asked. Based on the signal strength and dispersion pattern, thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. For a moment, the bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They'd won this battle, but in doing so, they'd drawn the attention of an enemy that could field fleets larger than anything humanity had ever imagined. Then Captain Chen smiled. Well, that's a problem for tomorrow. Today we've got one very surprised alien to deal with. Fire the antimatter warheads. The experimental weapons streaked toward their target, their exotic matter payloads representing the cutting edge of human weapons technology. When they struck the alien vessel, the results exceeded every projection. The antimatter annihilation created a localized space-time distortion that interacted catastrophically with the ship's quantum field generators. Reality hiccuped. For a brief instant, the massive alien vessel existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously before collapsing back into normal space as a cloud of rapidly dispersing particles. The first silence ship humanity had ever encountered was completely destroyed, target eliminated, Murphy reported in a stunned voice. The alien vessel has been completely obliterated. Chen stood slowly, staring at the empty space where their enemy had been. In the distance, the colonies on Kepler 442b were already sending signals confirming that the dark energy attacks had ceased. 30,000 human lives had been saved. But as she looked at the tactical display showing the larger galactic situation, she knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had just announced its presence to a galaxy-spanning empire that viewed them as a technological meal. The question was, what would happen when the silence decided that humans weren't prey, but predators? The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Ambassador Zexathera rushed into the chambers as delegates from hundreds of species argued frantically in dozens of languages. The massive holographic display at the center of the amphitheater showed something impossible, a tactical recording of a silence harvester being completely destroyed. Order! Order! Chancellor Vorthak's voice boomed across the assembly, but the delegates were too shocked to pay attention. Representatives, please. We must analyze this development calmly. Ancient sage Veltar's telepathic voice cut through the noise like a blade. Silence, all of you. We have witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A single primitive vessel has accomplished what our combined fleets could not. The recording played again, showing the human ship's impossible dance through space as it evaded silence weapons that should have erased it from existence. Then came the nuclear detonations. Primitive fusion fire somehow penetrating defenses that had withstood the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Dr. Yelithian materialized a complex analysis above her station. Honored colleagues, I have studied this encounter 17 times. The human weapons operate on principles so archaic that silence absorption fields cannot properly process them. It's like trying to digest rocks. The exotic matter systems simply don't recognize nuclear fusion as a technological threat. But how is that possible? Demanded Admiral Karath, his scaled hide displaying patterns of confusion. Our records indicate that humans achieved spaceflight only decades ago. Their technology should be laughably primitive. It is primitive, agreed Catherian delegate Sileth, her translucent form flickering with excitement. That's exactly why it works. The silence evolved to counter quantum weapons, exotic matter manipulation, dimensional phase arrays, all the technologies that advanced civilizations develop. They never adapted to defend against controlled stellar fire. Zexathara studied the tactical data with growing amazement. Look at their ship design. No energy shields, no quantum armor, no exotic matter drives. It's built like a kinetic projectile with engines attached. They don't fight like any spacefaring species we've encountered. The implications were staggering. For millennia, galactic warfare had evolved toward increasingly sophisticated weapons and defenses. Energy became more exotic, matter more complex, space itself became a battlefield. But humans had apparently skipped all of that in favor of bigger explosions. There's more, announced Dr. Yalithian, calling up additional data. Analysis of the human communication protocols reveals fascinating patterns. They don't use standard diplomatic language structures. Their captain essentially insulted the silence entity during combat. Insulted them? Chancellor Vorthak seemed confused. During battle? The humans appear to use psychological warfare as a standard combat doctrine. They deliberately provoke emotional responses in their enemies. Most species attempt to minimize conflict through careful diplomatic language. Humans seem to escalate it intentionally. Admiral Korath's hide patterns shifted to display grudging respect. Primitive but effective. If you can make your enemy angry, they make mistakes. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. Council members, we are receiving additional transmissions from Sector 7G. The humans appear to be expanding their operations. The main display shifted to show a wider view of human space. In the 24 hours since the first engagement, 3 more human ships had appeared in the system. They weren't military vessels. The signatures suggested cargo haulers and civilian transports. But each ship was armed with the same primitive weapons that had proven so effective against the silence. They're not retreating, observed Zexithara with something approaching admiration. Most species would evacuate after a first contact like that. The humans are bringing in reinforcements. That suggests either supreme confidence or complete insanity, noted Veltar. With humans, those might be the same thing, replied Dr. Yalithian, studying their behavioral patterns. Their species history shows a consistent pattern of responding to overwhelming threats by becoming more aggressive, not less. The Council's strategic assessment was interrupted by another alert. The silence response was beginning. Long-range sensors detected multiple harvester fleets changing course toward Sector 7G. What had been a routine harvesting operation was now being treated as a major threat, requiring significant resources. Ivanton, harvester fleets, reported the monitoring station. Over 4,000 silence vessels converging on human space. They're treating this species as a potential rival rather than prey. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. The silence hadn't deployed forces of that magnitude since the last galactic war 3 million years ago. To them, humanity represented something unprecedented, a threat that needed to be eliminated before it could spread. We need to warn them, declared Delegate Mordeth. Whatever humans are, they deserve to know what's coming. Warn them with what? Asked Admiral Korath. Our long-range communications require quantum entanglement networks that don't extend into their territory. By the time any message reaches them, the silence fleets will have arrived. Dr. Yalithian worked frantically at her console. I'm analyzing their communication frequencies. Humans use primitive electromagnetic radiation for interstellar messages. Incredibly slow, but it might be possible to reach them if we boost our signals through the deep space array. Do it, ordered Chancellor Vorthak. Whatever warnings we can provide, they've earned our assistance. As the technical teams worked to establish contact with the humans, the Council continued analyzing the tactical implications. If primitive weapons could damage silence technology, it suggested that the galaxy's approach to warfare had become too sophisticated for its own good. We should consider modifying our own weapons, suggested Admiral Korath. If nuclear fusion works against them, we can certainly build more powerful fusion devices. But that would require abandoning centuries of technological advancement, protested Delegate Quarthek. Our quantum phase disruptors are exponentially more powerful than any chemical reaction. Power isn't the issue, Dr. Yalithian explained. The silence can absorb and redirect quantum energy, but they can't process primitive nuclear fusion because it's too chaotic, too random. It's not elegant enough for their systems to understand. Ancient sage Veltar offered a different perspective. Perhaps this is why the humans succeeded. They never learned to think like us. While we pursued perfection and efficiency, they remained unrefined. Sometimes the crude solution is the correct solution. The communication team suddenly announced success. Contact established with human vessels in Sector 7G. They're accepting our transmission. The main display shifted to show the interior of a human ship's bridge. Captain Chen appeared on screen looking tired but determined. Behind her, Zexthara could see crew members working frantically at stations that looked incredibly primitive by galactic standards. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiance. Who am I speaking with? Chancellor Vorthak stepped forward. Captain Chen, I am Chancellor Vorthak of the Galactic Council. We represent the combined civilizations of this galaxy. We have observed your recent encounter with the entities you engaged. Chen's expression didn't change, but Zexathara noticed her crew members exchanging glances. You mean the silence? Yeah, we had a little chat with them. They weren't very neighborly. Captain, we must warn you. The Silence is deploying massive fleets toward your position. Over 4,000 vessels. You need to evacuate immediately. For a moment, Chen was silent. Then she smiled. An expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. Chancellor, with respect, humanity doesn't run from bullies. If these Silence bastards want to fight, we'll give them one they'll remember. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. In the face of overwhelming odds, the humans were preparing to stand their ground. They're completely insane, whispered Delegate Mordeth. Yes, agreed Zexathara, studying the tactical displays. But they are kind of insane. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the main screen of the UES Defiance, his expression grim but determined. Behind him, the Earth Command Situation Room buzzed with activity, as humanity's greatest minds worked around the clock to prepare for the coming storm. Captain Chen, we've received the Galactic Council's intelligence reports. 4,000 enemy vessels is beyond anything our war planners ever considered. But we're not going down without a fight. Sarah Chen nodded, studying the tactical projections floating above her command console. The numbers were staggering. Humanity's entire space fleet consisted of 37 ships, most of them exploration or cargo vessels hastily retrofitted with weapons. Against 4,000 Silence harvesters, it should have been a mathematical impossibility. What's our status on the emergency protocols, Admiral? Project Ragnarok is proceeding ahead of schedule. Every orbital shipyard in the solar system is working at maximum capacity. We're stripping industrial facilities, converting civilian vessels, and implementing some rather creative interpretations of existing military hardware. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, Earth's foremost expert on exotic physics, appeared beside Harrison on the screen. Captain, we've analyzed the data from your engagement. The Silence weakness to nuclear weapons appears to be fundamental to their technology base. We're implementing immediate modifications to exploit this. What kind of modifications? Chen asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. We're building bigger bombs, Reeves said simply. Much bigger. The mining crews on Ceres have been working non-stop to extract fissile materials. We're converting every nuclear reactor in the solar system to weapons production. If brute force is what works against these things, then humanity is going to show them what brute force really looks like. Chief Engineer Murphy looked up from his station. Captain, we're receiving updated schematics for the weapons upgrades. These new warheads. They're pushing the theoretical limits of matter conversion efficiency. Chen reviewed the technical specifications and whistled softly. The weapons Earth was producing would have been considered war crimes if used against human opponents. Each new torpedo carried enough destructive power to sterilize a small moon. There's more, Admiral Harrison continued. We've implemented the distributed fleet protocol. Every human colony is building weapons platforms using local resources. Mars is mass-producing kinetic kill vehicles. The asteroid belt miners are creating improvised railgun installations. Even our deep space research stations are being armed. Sir, with respect, none of that will be enough. 4,000 ships against 37, even with upgrades, the math doesn't work. Harrison smiled grimly. That's where you're wrong, Captain. We're not fighting them with 37 ships. We're fighting them with every piece of human engineering in the galaxy. The explanation that followed changed everything Chen thought she knew about humanity's preparations. While the Galactic Council had been debating diplomatic responses and the Silence had been mobilizing their fleets, humans had been doing what they did best, improvising solutions that shouldn't work but somehow did. Every human colony had become a weapons factory. Agricultural worlds were producing chemical explosives using farming equipment. Industrial planets were converting mining lasers into offensive weapons. Even the smallest research outposts were creating improvised missiles from whatever materials they had available. We're turning the entire human sphere of influence into a minefield, Harrison explained. The Silence expects to face conventional fleets. Instead, they're going to encounter weapons fire from every asteroid, every space station, every orbital platform we've ever built. Dr. Reeves added technical details. We've weaponized our infrastructure. Communication satellites now carry nuclear warheads. Cargo containers have been converted into kinetic projectiles. We've even figured out how to turn our fusion reactors into improvised bombs if necessary. Chen began to understand the scope of humanity's response. They weren't trying to fight the silence with superior technology or numbers. Instead, they were transforming every human presence in space into a potential weapon. It was simultaneously brilliant and completely insane. What about the colonies themselves? The civilian populations? That's the beautiful part, Harrison replied. We're not evacuating anyone. Every colonial governor has volunteered their facilities for the defense effort. 30 billion humans are working together to create the largest improvised weapons network in galactic history. The implications were staggering. The Silence expected to harvest isolated technological targets. Instead, they would face a distributed defense network that spanned dozens of star systems. Every approach vector would be covered by weapons that their absorption technology couldn't process. There's one more thing, Dr. Reeves said, her expression becoming even more serious. We've been studying the Galactic Council's historical records. The Silence has a psychological weakness we can exploit. What kind of weakness? They've never faced an opponent that intentionally chose to fight rather than flee. Every previous encounter followed the same pattern. The Silence appeared, local civilizations evacuated or were destroyed, and the Harvesters continued their expansion. But you didn't run, Captain. You attacked them, Chen frowned. So they don't know how to process that response. Their entire tactical doctrine assumes that intelligent species will attempt to preserve themselves when faced with overwhelming force. The concept of a species that becomes more aggressive when threatened is completely outside their experience. Chief Murphy looked up from his analysis of the incoming fleet deployments. Captain, if Dr. Reeves is right, then our psychological advantage might be as important as our weapons. These things have been the ultimate predator for millions of years. They've never been prey before. Then let's make sure they remember the experience, Chen replied grimly. The next several hours were spent coordinating with human forces across the galaxy. What Chen saw amazed her. Ordinary civilians were volunteering for missions that amounted to suicide runs. Mining crews were modifying their equipment to create weapons that had never been tested. Even children were contributing by helping to manufacture ammunition using school chemistry labs. It was humanity at its most resourceful and most dangerous. Faced with extinction, the species had responded not with despair but with furious creativity. Every human installation had become a fortress, every ship a potential weapon, every citizen a willing participant in the most audacious military operation in galactic history. Captain, reported Lieutenant Torres, we're receiving tactical updates from the outer system perimeter. Human forces are deploying according to the Ragnarok protocol. Initial defensive positions are being established. Chen studied the deployment maps. Humanity was essentially turning their entire territory into a three-dimensional battlefield. The Silence would find no easy targets, no vulnerable colonies to harvest without a fight. Every meter of space they advanced would cost them dearly. What's the estimated timeline for enemy arrival? Based on their approach vectors, the first Silence scouts will reach our outer defenses in 18 hours. The main fleet will arrive 6 hours after that. Chen nodded. 18 hours to make final preparations for a battle that would determine whether humanity survived as a species, or joined the countless civilizations that had fallen to the Silence over the millennia. But as she looked around her, bridge at the determined faces of her crew, she felt something she hadn't expected: confidence. Not because humanity had superior weapons or numbers, but because they had something the Silence had never encountered before. They had the absolute refusal to go quietly into the dark. All stations, prepare for combat operations. Send a message to all human forces throughout the galaxy. Tell them the Earth sends its regards, and we're about to show these ancient bastards what happens when you threaten the wrong species. As alarms sounded throughout human space, and 30 billion people prepared for war, the galaxy held its breath. The most primitive spacefaring civilization ever recorded was about to face the most advanced predator in galactic history. The odds were impossible. The stakes were absolute, and humanity couldn't wait to get started. The first Silent scout ships entered human space expecting to find the same thing they had encountered for millions of years: scattered settlements ripe for harvesting, with perhaps token resistance from primitive vessels. Instead, they flew into the largest improvised minefield in galactic history. Captain Chen watched the engagement from the bridge of the Defiance, now positioned at the center of humanity's defensive network. The tactical display showed the scout ships as they approached the outer asteroid belt, where humanity had spent weeks preparing surprises. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Lieutenant Torres. "The scouts are moving in standard formation, sweeping for technological signatures." "Let them get close," Chen ordered. "We want them to think we're just another primitive species hiding in the rocks." The silent scouts were elegant vessels, smaller than the harvester she had fought but still massive by human standards. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, their exotic matter hulls phasing in and out of normal space as they searched for targets. That confidence proved to be their downfall. The first scout passed within range of mining station Alpha 7, which had been hastily converted into a weapons platform. What looked like a simple asteroid processing facility suddenly revealed itself to be the largest nuclear weapons depot in human space. "Alpha 7, you are cleared to engage," Chen transmitted. The response was immediate and devastating. Instead of sophisticated energy weapons, the converted mining station launched a barrage of nuclear-tipped mining charges. Crude, powerful explosives designed to crack asteroids. Against the silent scouts' advanced shields, they should have been useless. Instead, they were catastrophically effective. The scout ship's absorption fields, designed to counter exotic energy weapons, couldn't process the chaotic nuclear fusion reactions. "The first explosions tore through its hull like it was made of paper. Direct hit," called out Chief Murphy. "The scout is breaking apart." But that was just the beginning. As the damaged Silence vessel tried to retreat, it flew into the secondary trap. What appeared to be empty space around the asteroid belt was actually filled with thousands of kinetic kill vehicles, simple chunks of metal, accelerated to significant fractions of light, speed using modified cargo, launchers. The scout ship, wounded and desperate, took dozens of impacts from projectiles that couldn't be absorbed or deflected. Its exotic matter hull, designed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, was being torn apart by weapons that operated purely in normal space. "Scout ship destroyed," Torres reported. "The other scouts are falling back to regroup." Chen smiled grimly. "Send a message to all stations. Phase 1 is complete. Prepare for Phase 2. The destruction of the scout ship sent shockwaves through the approaching Silence fleet. For the first time in their recorded history, they had lost vessels to primitive chemical weapons. The fleet's advance slowed as the harvesters attempted to analyze what had happened. That hesitation cost them dearly. While the Silence fleet reconsidered their approach, humanity's distributed defense network activated in full. Hidden weapons platforms throughout human space revealed themselves, launching coordinated attacks designed to exploit the enemy's demonstrated weakness. From the converted mining stations of the asteroid belt to the improvised missile platforms of the outer colonies, humanity unleashed everything they had built: nuclear warheads, kinetic projectiles, and even weaponized industrial equipment streaked toward the Silence fleet. The enemy's response was swift but confused. Dark energy beams lanced out, erasing some of the incoming projectiles from existence. But for every missile they destroyed, 10 more took its place. Human weapons production had been operating at impossible levels for weeks, and the results were overwhelming. "Admiral Harrison to all human forces," came the transmission from Earth Command. "Execute Operation Swarm. All civilian vessels are cleared to engage." Chen watched in amazement as the second phase of humanity's defense began. Cargo haulers, passenger transports, even private yachts emerged from their hiding places throughout human space. Each vessel had been hastily armed with whatever weapons could be mounted on their hulls. They shouldn't have been effective. Most were flying little more than improvised missiles with life support systems. But there were thousands of them, and they attacked with a ferocity that defied all tactical logic. "Captain," called Dr. Kim from his science station, "I'm reading massive confusion in the Silence fleet communications. Their tactical networks appear to be overloading trying to process threat assessments." They've never fought a distributed opponent, Chen realized. Their whole strategy is based on facing centralized fleets in isolated colonies. They don't know how to respond to an entire civilization that's armed itself. The battle evolved into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The Silence fleet, despite its technological superiority, found itself constantly surprised by human tactics. Just when they adapted to nuclear weapons, humanity deployed kinetic kill vehicles. When they countered those, Humans launched chemical explosive attacks that operated on principles the Silence had forgotten existed. But the most effective weapon turned out to be humanity's complete disregard for conventional military wisdom. While other species tried to preserve their forces and minimize casualties, humans threw everything they had into the fight with reckless abandon. Freighter Constantine to defiance, came a transmission from one of the civilian vessels. We're making a torpedo run on Harvester Delta 4. Wish us luck. Chen watched as the converted cargo ship, packed with enough nuclear explosives to level a city, flew directly into the heart of the Silence formation. The Harvester's dark energy beams struck the freighter repeatedly, but the human crew kept flying straight toward their target. The Constantine exploded in a brilliant flash of fusion fire, taking the massive Harvester with it. But even as Chen mourned the crew's sacrifice, she felt a surge of pride. This was what humans did. They found ways to win even when victory was impossible. Tactical assessment, Chen called out. Enemy fleet strength is down 30%, Torres reported. But Captain, we've lost over 60% of our improvised fleet. The civilian vessels are taking massive casualties. Chen knew the mathematics were still against them. Despite their success, humanity was trading numbers they couldn't afford to lose. But the battle was having effects beyond simple attrition. Dr. Kim, what's your analysis of the Silence fleet behavior? They're becoming increasingly erratic, Kim reported. Their formation discipline is breaking down. Some harvesters are advancing aggressively, while others are attempting to retreat. I think their command structure is failing. That made sense. The Silence had evolved as the galaxy's apex predator, facing only prey species that either fled or were quickly consumed. They had never developed the command flexibility needed to fight an opponent that refused to behave rationally. All stations, this is Captain Chen. Implement Phase 3. Target their command vessels. Phase 3 was humanity's most audacious gambit yet. Instead of continuing to trade shots with the Silence fleet, human forces began concentrating their attacks on the largest harvesters, the command ships that coordinated the entire fleet. It was a desperate strategy that required sacrificing even more vessels, but it worked. As the massive command harvesters fell to concentrated nuclear attacks, the Silence fleet began to fragment. Without centralized coordination, individual ships started making tactical decisions based on their own assessments, and those assessments were increasingly influenced by something the Silence had never experienced before: fear. Captain, Torres called out excitedly. Multiple Silence vessels are changing course. They're retreating. Chen stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Nearly a third of the Silence fleet was actually withdrawing from the battle. The galaxy's most feared predator was running away from humanity's improvised defenses. Don't let up, she ordered. Pursue and engage. We need to make sure they remember this lesson. As human forces pressed their attack against the retreating Silence vessels, Captain Chen realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. For the first time in millions of years, the Silence had met an opponent they couldn't simply harvest. But more than that, they had encountered a species that became more dangerous when threatened. The harder the Silence pushed, the more creative and vicious humanity's response became. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since this war began, Chen allowed herself to believe that humanity might actually survive. After all, they were just getting started. 6 months after the battle for human space, Ambassador Zexathara stood before the largest gathering in Galactic Council history. Representatives from over 10,000 species filled the massive amphitheater. Their attention focused on the remarkable human delegation that had just concluded their presentation. Captain Sarah Chen, now promoted to admiral and serving as humanity's first galactic ambassador, stood beside a holographic display showing the transformed state of galactic warfare. Where once the Silence had advanced unopposed across dozens of sectors, now their expansion had not only stopped but was actually reversing. Honored representatives, Chen addressed the assembly. 6 months ago, most of you had never heard of humanity. Today I'm here to discuss the formation of the largest military alliance in galactic history. The numbers on the display were staggering. Following humanity's unexpected victory, over 300 species had contacted Earth requesting military cooperation agreements. The psychological impact of seeing the Silence retreat had shattered their reputation for invincibility. Chancellor Vorthak rose from his seat, his expression mixing amazement with cautious hope. "Admiral Chen, your species has accomplished what we believed impossible. But the silence still fields thousands of vessels. How do you propose to defeat such a massive force?" Chen smiled, that expression that had become famous throughout the galaxy as a symbol of human determination. "Chancellor, we're not planning to defeat them. We're planning to do something much worse. We're going to teach the galaxy how to think like humans." The presentation that followed revolutionized galactic military doctrine. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, now serving as humanity's chief science advisor to the Council, explained how primitive technologies could be weaponized against advanced defenses. "The key is chaos," Reeves explained to the fascinated delegates. "The silence evolved to counter predictable, elegant solutions. But humans specialize in unpredictable, inelegant solutions that somehow work anyway." She displayed technical schematics, showing how dozens of species were already implementing human-inspired weapons. The Meridian Empire had converted their elegant particle beam arrays into crude but effective fusion torpedo launchers. The Catherian Collective was mass-producing kinetic kill vehicles using modified cargo haulers. Most remarkably, species were beginning to abandon their most advanced technologies in favor of simpler, more brutal alternatives. The psychological shift was as important as the tactical one. Civilizations that had fled from the silence for millennia were now eager to fight. Ancient sage Veltar offered his perspective. "In my 3,000 years, I have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Never have I seen a species transform the galaxy's approach to warfare so completely in such a short time." Admiral Korath, who had become one of humanity's strongest supporters, presented the military assessment. Human tactical doctrine emphasizes adaptation over optimization. Where we spend centuries perfecting weapons systems, humans build functional prototypes in weeks and improve them through combat experience. The results spoke for themselves. Joint human-alien task forces were reporting unprecedented success rates against silence vessels. More importantly, the enemy was showing signs of genuine confusion and fear. "We've captured several silence vessels," Chen reported. "Our xenobiology teams working with Galactic Council scientists have made remarkable discoveries about their nature." Dr. Kim, now leading the joint research effort, presented their findings. "The silence are not a single species but a collective consciousness that exists primarily in digital space. They inhabit technology itself, which is why advanced civilizations are so attractive to them. But human weapons operate on principles too primitive for their consciousness to properly interface with." The implications were revolutionary. The silence weren't just harvesting technology. They were trying to expand their digital existence by consuming the quantum computing networks that advanced civilizations depended upon. Human fusion reactors and chemical explosives existed in purely physical space, where the silence consciousness couldn't follow. "We're essentially forcing them to fight in a realm where they're disadvantaged," Dr. Kim continued. "It would be like asking a digital entity to engage in hand-to-hand combat." But the most significant development wasn't technological, it was psychological. Species throughout the galaxy were rediscovering something that advanced civilizations had abandoned long ago: the willingness to take risks. Delegate Mordeth of the Hegemony explained the cultural transformation. "For thousands of years we pursued safety and predictability. Our societies became risk-averse. Our militaries focused on preservation rather than victory. Humans have reminded us that sometimes survival requires embracing danger." The changes were visible everywhere. The careful diplomatic language that had dominated galactic politics for millennia was giving way to more direct communication. Species were abandoning their elegant, efficient technologies in favor of robust, adaptable alternatives. Most importantly, civilizations were beginning to work together in ways they never had before. The Galactic Defense Coalition now includes 4,000 member species, Admiral Korath reported. "We're implementing human tactical principles across a front spanning 12 galactic arms." The silence finds itself facing not just human weapons, but human-inspired tactics employed by civilizations with resources they never possessed. The war wasn't over, but its character had completely changed. Where once the silence faced isolated, frightened civilizations armed with predictable weapons, they now confronted a galaxy-wide alliance that seemed to become more dangerous with each engagement. Captain Torres, now commanding the UES Defiance II, provided the latest tactical reports. Silence forces are consolidating toward the galactic core. Intelligence suggests they're attempting to construct some kind of super harvester, using technology accumulated over millions of years. Chen nodded grimly. Which brings us to our next phase. Operation Prometheus. The plan she outlined was audacious even by human standards. Rather than continue defensive operations, the coalition would launch a coordinated assault on the silent strongholds at the galaxy's center. It would be the largest military operation in galactic history, combining human tactics with the resources of thousands of civilizations. The objective isn't just military victory, Chen explained. We're going to liberate every species the silence has enslaved over the millennia. Some of our projections suggest there may be billions of beings trapped within their digital networks. Ancient Sage Veltar's telepathic voice carried notes of awe and terror. You propose to assault the accumulated technological power of 3 million years. The risks are beyond calculation. Respectfully, Sage Veltar, humans don't calculate risks, Chen replied. We take them anyway and figure out how to succeed afterward. It's worked pretty well for us so far. The council session concluded with unanimous approval for Operation Prometheus. As delegates dispersed to prepare their forces for the coming campaign, Zexathara approached the human delegation. Admiral Chen, I must ask, are your people truly prepared for what you're proposing? The Silence Core worlds contain technologies that predate most civilizations. Chen's expression was both confident and slightly unhinged, a combination that had become humanity's trademark. Ambassador Zexathara, 6 months ago we were a primitive species that had never encountered aliens. Today we're leading a galactic alliance against the most powerful force in known history. Does that sound like a species that's afraid of ancient technology? As the human delegation departed to coordinate the largest military operation in galactic history, Zexathara reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed. The Silence, once feared as inevitable harbingers of extinction, were now the ones facing an uncertain future. And all because one primitive species had refused to run when any rational civilization would have fled. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided to take the fight to the enemy's home. The universe had never seen anything like what was coming next.